Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine for a moment a field buzzing with life, bees darting from flower to flower. It seems chaotic, but inside their hive there's this incredible order. And that's what we're exploring today, the surprising wisdom we can actually learn from honeybees. Things about working together, collective intelligence, and maybe how our own societies could, well, thrive a bit more.
Exactly. We're drawing on a really fascinating set of texts today that use the bee as this powerful metaphor. They connect the dots between how bees organize themselves, how they make decisions, and how humans might approach similar things, society, choices, even finding a kind of spiritual wisdom in it all.
So our mission is basically to unpack how these tiny insects show us principles that could really lift our own efforts, both as individuals and together. Think of it as getting some valuable insights by looking closely at one of nature's truly amazing systems.
Okay, let's dive in. It really is amazing how organized a beehive is. The more you read, the more incredible the whole structure seems. So what did our sources focus on first about how the hive actually, works inside?
Well, the sources immediately point to the highly structured nature of bee society. It's all about roles. You've got the queen, obviously the sole leader, focused on reproduction. Then the vast majority are worker bees. They do, almost everything else. Foraging for nectar and pollen, building the comb, caring for larvae, hive maintenance.
But they're the real workhorses.
Absolutely. And then you have the male bees, the drones. Their job is basically mating. And after that, their role is done. It's this very clear division of labor, often based on age for the workers, that makes the whole thing so incredibly productive collectively. Right. And the sources mentioned something about the individual bees' contribution, didn't they? Something quite surprising.
Yes. And this is really key. A single worker bee, only lives for about 6, maybe 8 weeks. In that short time, she'll visit thousands of flowers, fly miles and miles. But her individual output, it's tiny. We're talking about maybe a single teaspoon of honey over her whole life.
Wow, only a teaspoon. For all that effort, that really puts things in perspective.
It does. And the scale is just astonishing when you look at the collective numbers the sources provide. To get just 1 kilogram of honey that's about 2.2 pounds, it takes something like 10,000 worker bees. Together, they need to visit around 4 million flowers. And the total distance flown, over 100,000 kilometers, that's like flying around the Earth 2.5 times.
Goodness, so it's not about the individual bee's output at all, really?
Not in isolation, no. It's about what the sources call this collective consciousness. It's this emergent intelligence, this result that comes from countless small actions, all directed towards the hive's goal. That's what produces something significant, like a full comb of honey.
And didn't the sources highlight something profound about why they do it? Something about selflessness?
Yes, exactly. This observation really stood out. These worker bees produce all this honey, but they don't actually consume it themselves. Not a single gram.
They don't get paid, they don't hoard it.
No. It's a purely selfless contribution to the colony, to the future generations. The sources argue this isn't just, a biological detail. It's a fundamental principle. If each bee acted purely for itself, the hive's needs would never be met. The whole system would collapse. It really drives home how crucial that shared purpose, that collective effort, truly is. It's not just nice to have, it's essential for survival.
Okay, so they have this amazing collective drive. But how do they coordinate? Without emails or meetings? How do thousands of bees decide, say, okay, this field of flowers is the best one today, or even something huge like we need to move the whole hive? How does that work?
That's where we get into what the texts call bee consultation, or using the specific terms from some sources, istisharah or Shura. It basically means collective deliberation, collective decision-making. And the most famous example of this is the Waggle-dance.
Ah, yes, the Waggle-dance.
Exactly. When a scout bee finds a really good source of nectar or maybe a great spot for a new home, she comes back to the hive and performs this specific dance. It's not random. It's incredibly precise. The angle of the dance tells other bees the direction relative to the sun, the duration of the waggle part tells them the distance, and even the sort of enthusiasm of the dance conveys the quality or efficiency of the source.
So it's like a living map and a review all rolled into one dance.
Pretty much. And crucially, other bees don't just blindly follow. They watch the dance, they feel the vibrations through the comb, and then they go check it out themselves. They verify the information. This whole process ensures the hive makes the most efficient and safest choices. It avoids putting all their, eggs in one basket based on just one bee's report. especially for massive decisions, like moving the entire colony that requires a strong consensus built on this shared, verified information.
That's fascinating, a sort of built-in peer review system. But you mentioned the sources link this to human practices, even spiritually.
They do, very directly. The sources we looked at draw a strong connection, pointing out how the Qur'an actually mandates this principle of consultation, Shura, for believers. It's not just encouraged, it's presented as a fundamental way to conduct affairs. There's a specific verse mentioned. Their affairs are by consultation among themselves. And another one instructs, consult with them in the matter. And when you've decided, then rely upon Allah. What's really emphasized is that even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who had divine guidance, consistently practiced consultation. He valued the input of his companions immensely.
So what does this all mean for us then? It seems the core idea, whether looking at bees or these spiritual texts, is that our own smarts, our own efforts, they're okay on their own, but they become so much more powerful, so much wiser when we pool them together, when we actually talk and listen.
That's exactly the point the sources are making. Individual intelligence, like a single bee's drop of honey, has its limits. But when combined through open discussion, through genuine consultation, it's amplified incredibly.
Okay, so we have this image of the hive as a place of collaboration, sweetness, honey. But there's another side to the bee, isn't there? The sources brought up, the sting.
Yes, and this adds another really interesting layer to the metaphor, especially regarding consultation. Bees, as the texts point out, produce two very different things: healing honey and defensive venom.
Right, sweetness and sharpness.
Precisely. And the sting, in this context, represents those diverse opinions within a group, the ones that might be challenging, critical, maybe even a bit painful to hear initially. Think about it in a meeting or a community discussion. When someone offers a really contrary idea or points out flaws in a plan, it can feel uncomfortable, right? Like a sting.
Definitely. The tendency is often to shut that down or ignore it.
But the wisdom here, according to these sources, is that just like different nectars create richer, more beneficial honey, these stinging opinions, if we actually listen and evaluate them constructively, can lead to much deeper understanding and wiser decisions. If you only ever consult people who agree with you, or if you shut down dissent, it's like trying to make honey from only one type of flower. The result will be limited, maybe even unhealthy. You miss out on the complexity and strength that comes from diversity.
That's a powerful analogy. It makes you wonder how much single flower honey we're producing in our organizations or even our own thinking by avoiding the sting of different views.
It's a real challenge highlighted in the material. This idea of modern individualism, sometimes leading to what the sources call single-type thinking, where we surround ourselves only with echoes of our own thoughts, well, it weakens this vital culture of consultation. The core argument is that no single mind, however brilliant, has all the answers. It's inherently incomplete. And interestingly, the sources connect the very root of the word Shura to this bee-like process, collecting diverse essences and transforming them into something valuable. Human thought, they suggest, should work the same way.
It really poses a question for all of us. How do we get better at not just tolerating, but actually valuing those uncomfortable, stinging perspectives in our discussions? How do we learn to see them as potentially valuable nectar, not just venom? We focused a lot on what happens inside the hive, but the bee's influence extends much further out, doesn't it? What about its role in the wider environment?
Oh, absolutely. That's a critical piece the sources emphasize. Bees aren't just making honey for themselves or their hive. Their actions are fundamental to the entire ecosystem. Their primary ecological role beyond honey production is pollination. As they move from flower to flower collecting nectar and pollen, they're transferring pollen, which is essential for so many plants to reproduce. We're talking flowers, fruit trees, vegetables, even crops like alfalfa that feed livestock. They're linchpins in maintaining nature's balance.
So they're not just producers, they're facilitators, enablers of life.
Exactly. And to really drive this home, the texts mention that famous quote, the one often attributed to Einstein.
The one about if bees disappear.
That's the one. If bees disappear from the earth, humans would only have 4 years left. Now, whether Einstein actually said it exactly like that is debated, but the core message is stark and ecologically sound. It highlights that bees aren't just incidental. They're critical infrastructure for our planet's food webs and ultimately for our own survival. Their work underpins so much of what we rely on.
Wow. So the fate of the bee is deeply, deeply tied to our own. That's interdependence on a massive scale. How do the sources connect this back to the human experience?
Directly. They draw a clear parallel. Just as the bee is part of this larger, interconnected natural system, humans are part of an interdependent social system. And just like in the hive, human societies function best, they thrive, when individuals use their unique talents and fulfill their roles not just for personal gain, but for the collective good, when we understand our connection to the whole.
That idea you mentioned earlier comes back. A single bee's honey has no meaning.
What matters is that the drop is a product of the hive. Yes, that concept is applied directly to human achievement. Think about any great scientific discovery, any major social progress, any successful organization. It's rarely, if ever, down to just one person. It's built on collective effort, on shared knowledge passed down, on different people contributing their piece, sometimes making sacrifices for the group. That's how we build something lasting and meaningful, like the hive builds its comb.
And the flip side, presumably, is that when individual agendas completely take over, when we forget that interdependence, that's when the human hive starts to weaken, when our collective intelligence suffers.
That's precisely the warning. When self-interest eclipses the common good, you get fragmentation, conflict, and a breakdown in that shared wisdom. But conversely, when information, experience, ideas, when they're shared openly, like bees sharing pollen, they multiply, they gain value. That sharing, that collective processing, is what allows human potential to truly flourish.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. Let's bring it right into our structures, our societies, companies, institutions, maybe even how leaders should operate. How do these bee lessons, this idea of consultation, apply there? Did the sources look at history?
Yes, they did. They point to historical patterns, suggesting that great civilizations, periods of significant progress and flourishing, often coincided with leaders and societies that genuinely valued and practiced consultation, or mesvere, another term used. Leaders who actively sought out diverse perspectives, who listened to counsel, tended to preside over periods of strength and innovation.
And the opposite.
Conversely, the decline often set in when leaders became autocratic, when they relied solely on their own judgment, ignored dissent, and made arbitrary decisions. When consultation was sidelined, the collective wisdom was lost, and decline often followed.
That feels relevant today, doesn't it?
Very much so. The sources argue that many modern challenges stem from this very issue. There's often such a strong emphasis on individual power, on short-term wins, on a sort of top-down command and control approach. And this actively suppresses genuine consultation. It discourages the sharing of potentially stinging truths and prevents the collective intelligence from really emerging and guiding decisions. We missed out on the honey of well-considered, collectively owned outcomes.
And it's striking that the sources don't just present consultation as, like, a helpful management technique. They frame it as something much more fundamental.
Much more. It's described as essential, even as a social obligation. Top plumsal beer fars is a phrase used almost like a divine program for how society should function. It's not optional for a healthy community, it's foundational.
So strong societies are built by people working together, thinking together.
Exactly, by individuals who see their efforts, their knowledge, their experiences as part of a larger whole. They collaborate in production, yes, but also crucially, in decision-making. They integrate their individual insights into that collective intelligence. Because information, like pollen, only creates widespread benefit when it's shared and transformed together.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We started inside the hive, looking at that incredible organization, the specialized roles, the sheer power of collective effort over individual limitations.
Then we saw how they communicate and make decisions through that amazing Waggle-dance consultation, verifying information collectively.
Right. And then the surprising wisdom of the idea that diverse, even challenging opinions are crucial, like different nectars for rich honey. We shouldn't shy away from them.
And we saw the bees' vital role in the wider world, pollination, highlighting our own deep interdependence with nature and with each other, that what one does affects the whole.
It all seems to point back to this core idea about collective intelligence and shared effort.
It really does. The ultimate message from these sources, drawing on the bee metaphor, seems to be that our human intellect, our capacity for thought and innovation, finds its true power, its real meaning, when it's shared and processed collectively. That continuous dance of the bees, sharing information, verifying it, acting on it together, it's like a timeless model for us. Knowledge grows when shared. Collective awareness leads to better choices. Society moves forward through, well, common sense, built together, not just isolated flashes of brilliance.
So perhaps here's a final thought for everyone listening, something to really chew on. What if we approached our own challenges in our workplaces, our communities, even our personal lives with that same spirit? Imagine tackling problems with the collective wisdom, the diligent collaboration, the open-minded consultation we see in a beehive. What kind of honey, what kind of results, what kind of society could we produce then? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.